right, welcome everyone. I'm excited to have folks joining us for the volunteer engagement webinar. This is our last capacity building webinar for the year. I'm excited to talk about this topic. A lot of folks have shared and reached out to us at Missouri Main Street that volunteer engagement, volunteer recruitment specifically, has really been a struggle since COVID happened. People's habits changed. They got out of the habit of volunteering. Priorities changed. And so we hear it in many, many communities about, hey, we need some help, re-engaging with volunteers. What are other communities doing? And so we've turned to an expert in the field, Jill Purvis, previous executive director for Warrensburg's Main Street program. And I'll let her do a little bit more of her introduction, but they have really done a great job with volunteer engagement in Warrensburg. We can always learn from each other. And so I highly encourage you to interact with us via the question and answer portion of the webinar. And also to remind everyone that this is being recorded. So welcome YouTube watchers for those watching us later. But let's jump into this topic because I know Jill has a lot to discuss and share with us. And some of this is going to be a conversation between Jill and I about what works, what we've seen across the network related to volunteer engagement. But Jill, let's start with you and let's get started.
Great. Good morning, everybody. As Keith said, my name is Jill Purvis. I've been involved with Main Street since 2012. I started out as an event coordinator here in Warrensburg and moved away and did some remote work for them before working remotely was a thing. Came back as the executive director for around 5 years and have been retired now almost 2 years. So I'm happy to be here. Love the Main Street movement, Main Street communities, and excited to talk to you guys about volunteer engagement and just getting your community behind your organization and making those changes in your downtown. So let's just start from the top. Why do volunteers matter? So these are pretty simple, pretty straightforward. They multiply your capacity for your organization and the impact you make. They build your community's ownership and they strengthen those partnerships. They bring local knowledge and creativity, and they ensure your long-term stability for your organization. So we're going to dive into those a little bit more. They multiply capacity. We all have limited budgets. We all have a small group of dedicated people. Some of us have staff. Some of us are all volunteer driven, but we all have big things that we want to happen in our communities. So volunteers and engaging those volunteers, they're the ones that can make all those big ideas happen. You can just really look throughout your community and really find those skilled people who can help you with your marketing, your grant writing, all different types of things that you need done in your organization. Whether you already have a staff or you're a completely volunteer-driven board, you can really maximize your impact by using volunteers. And like I said, they build community ownership. So it's really important. This was kind of a big thing of and include everybody. Think about everybody in your community. You really want to reach out to everybody, every nook and cranny where you can find people, and you're going to build that community pride. And that's really, in Warrensburg, we kind of switched that motto as we're community pride builders. We're the ones that are going to make people fall in love with your community. So we're the ones that are going to do that. And in order to do that, you have to include everybody. So you kind of have to reach out to everybody.
And Jill, those Main Street programs that are really rocking and rolling understand these 2 points right here. Is that, as an organization, if we want to accomplish the great things that we have planned and that we have dreamt, we're going to have to increase the number of people involved in the organization. So multiplying that capacity. And, we're going to get into some of this in just a little bit more with details, but, what do we need volunteers for? That's, I think, sometimes the thing that we tend to skip. We just expect people to volunteer for us and not knowing what we want them to do. It's like they're just going to raise their hand and say, yes, I'll come help you, but I don't know what you want me to do. Just tell me what you want me to do. And that's not how people volunteer. They want to know what the expectation is. They want to know what the time commitment is. But we've got to increase the tent. We got to bring more people underneath our tent to help us do that. And that then helps build that community ownership. We want the Main Street we want folks to feel ownership in the Main Street, feel ownership in downtown. And it's something that really Jill's going to call out is getting those other entities, other stakeholder groups involved in your organization, businesses, civic groups, the schools, really opportunities to get folks involved in what we're doing in downtown because they want a great community also. And so that's where we connect, that we both organizations want to do something really good for the community.
Going more in depth, bringing your local knowledge and creativity, your community are the ones that, support your downtown. They're the ones that are down there. They're the ones that are seeing it regularly. They know what makes your community unique because they live there. They're going to be able to inspire ideas that maybe you as staff or maybe you that are really close to your organization aren't seeing maybe. They are going to bring in new ideas and fresh approaches. And they ensure that long-term stability. So you have these volunteers that feel truly invested. They feel like their voice has been heard. They feel like they're making an impact. Then they're going to want to keep this organization going. And that's what it's really all about. Warrensburg has been around for 30 plus years, and it started out just like a lot of our Main Streets start out as these kind of businesses that said we need to get together and we need to work towards revitalizing and maintaining our downtown district. And what, like I said, I feel like it has morphed into as along with that, you still have that part of your Main Street that's we're here to revitalize this district. We want to preserve its history, but you're also that community builder. You're that one that's going to get community pride. You're the one who's going to build that excitement about your town. You're the one that is there to be like, hey, we've got great things happening down in our town. And then those community members are going to spread the word and they're going to say, hey, come down to our downtown. We have some cool stuff happening. And that's what keeps that long-term stability of your organization is kind of that inclusiveness and building that pride for your community.
Yeah, it becomes contagious. And while Main Street is economic development, Main Street is really people development. We have to work with people to get the things done that we want to do in our downtown district. But there's many a story of someone volunteering for a Main Street program, becoming a monthly committee member, becoming a committee chair, then becoming a board member, and then even becoming a staff person for the organization. But also that same chain has led to city council members that have gone through that Main Street progression. Mayors of communities have gone through that progression. So, it's welcoming folks in, giving them something to do, making them feel part of the organization in downtown. And then if they want to grow, providing a clear path for them of here's how you can be a leader with us here in Main Street.
So, of course, all of our Main Street organizations, we follow our 4-point approach. And these are our four committees. And so your volunteers can help with all different types of things within these committees. But here's just to highlight, your design, beautification projects, public art. In Warrensburg, actually, we have a whole separate public art committee, and it's a really low-level commitment. They meet a couple times a year just to kind of throw out all those ideas. And they're the ones that are, sending us pictures as they're traveling, saying, hey, look at this cool art piece in this town. It's a really low-level commitment for them, but they obviously have a lot of pride about that because they're the ones that kind of steer that ideas to that design committee to then have public art in our community. So that's a great low-level way that you can bring in other people to design. You have your promotion, of course, your events, your marketing, social media. You can have a social media person for a day or a week if you're that brave to let somebody, manage your Instagram during an event. So that's really low-level stuff. You can bring people in through promotions. You have your org committee, obviously, that does a lot of your fundraising and manages committees and gives your board support. You have economic vitality that is business outreach and data collection. Also really easy ways to get some low-level volunteers is just to ask somebody to come and help you collect data for a day or an hour. when you're going around your downtown businesses.
When I'm talking about volunteers with Main Street programs, the first one that always comes to mind is a volunteer photographer. We are very bad about taking pictures at our events because we're putting them on. We have responsibilities. We have things that we've got to take care of. We've got to be concerned about the other volunteers that are doing things and all those things that there's just not enough time to take pictures. And so having a dedicated person, a dedicated volunteer to do photography during your events is so valuable. Then you've got the pictures you need to tell the story later about this event or this project. But also, if it's an annual event, you now have pictures for next year as you're promoting that event. And that's a very easy thing. Do you have a photographer in your community that you can ask? Or is there a photography club within your community? Or even looking at the high school for a photography class?
I like to use the example, we have a prom parade event in Warrensburg, and one of the first years we did it, we reached out to somebody known within our organization that was just kind of dipping their toe in taking professional pictures. And we used her, and now fast forward 5 years, she's one of the most in high demand senior picture photographers in our area. And I'm not saying that we're the ones that made her that. I'm just saying that we caught her kind of on the early end. And because of that exposure to all those high school kids, she also benefited in her business by having that opportunity as well to market to them.
Sure. Yeah, we want businesses to be successful. And if they're willing to donate some time to us, then that's great.
So here's the big thing. There's no magic wand. I think that a lot of us think, oh my gosh, look at this Main Street or look at that Main Street. They always seem to have volunteers. They always seem to, they must just have a whole pool of people just begging to help. And there is no magic wand. There is no magic formula. It's really about consistent outreach. It's communication with your community and your volunteers and just getting everybody involved. It's having a plan. It's executing that plan, and it really is a constant, something you work on every year, every month, just to build that volunteer group, because volunteers are going to come and go. We've had volunteers with our organization that we've actually nominated for awards, and then things change in their lives and they move on to something else and they don't volunteer with us anymore. Like Keith said, there's people that'll go up through the trajectory of being a small volunteer up all the way to a board member. And then there's people that are going to come in for a season and they're going to do great things for you. And then they're going to leave. So it's just a consistent outreach that is really the way to success.
Communicate, and ask. And we've got to tell our story. And we say that constantly in the Main Street world. It's not only for fundraising and for grants, but we have to tell our story, who we are and what we do. And then when it comes to volunteers, what do we need help with? What are those opportunities? How you can be involved? And as you said, Jill, there has to be a volunteer plan, an action plan, just like every event, every project. If we're not constantly working this angle of volunteers, it's not going to happen. Like I said, there's no magic wand. They're just not going to, line up at the door. So we have to have a plan, and that's what falls under that organization committee when it comes to this volunteer recruitment piece.
Absolutely. So there's all types of volunteers, and you just need to think through what your organization needs. But you have those event and one-time volunteers, those people that just come for that specific event. You have micro volunteers. So this might be somebody that you find that you say, hey, can you pass out flyers for an hour today? Can you go do our Walmart pickup today? Can you come unpack these boxes for an hour today? Can you come in and help us clean up after an event and get our office back in order? These are people that can dedicate just a small hour of time. So, and when we talk about these types of volunteers, you kind of need to have, like Keith said, what you guys need. So then when you run across people in your community and, they say, oh, how can I volunteer? Or what types of things, you can kind of be ready to say, this is the types of things we need. You're going to have your project volunteers that work for the length of a project. They're the ones that are going to help plan out that new art project and all the details and where it's going to go. And they're going to take it from beginning to end. You have decision makers, those people within your organization who help you make decisions. You have committee chairs, of course. You have your board members. You have your committee members. If you have you could create an advisory board. We have an advisory board in Warrensburg, and these are members that are past board members that have that really institutional knowledge that can continue to help stabilize your board. They really give great advice to our board on just institutional questions and more on the org side of things they work on. Use your community partners. If you have great partnerships within your community with other nonprofits, with like school groups, university groups, hospital volunteers, use those partnerships, leverage those partnerships, to get volunteers for yourself. We talked about this in another webinar, like make those partnerships. You as an organization go and help them, volunteer with them, and in turn, ask them to volunteer with you.
Yep. Most of the time when I see Main Street's doing, like a volunteer intake form, or it's a form on their website, all they put are the 4 committees as options for volunteering. And so I think this realization that not every volunteer wants to meet monthly and take that time and be part of the decision making. Some volunteers, as you said, they just want to come work for an hour, help clean up the office or help do a mailing or whatever it may be. But we're not giving those options when we're thinking about our sign up forms for volunteers or what we have on our website. And so this realization, I think, can be very helpful for Main Street programs, that there are people that will just come work and volunteer for an hour, and that's okay. Not every volunteer wants to be a board member eventually. Some of them just want to play a part, a role, and don't want to end up as a board member. And I also joke about, if there's a banker or a finance person on your board of directors, they always end up being the treasurer because, of course, they have that expertise. But there's been a Main Street program or two that person said, no, I do that all day long. I do not want to be the treasurer for the organization. I want to do something different. So recognizing people's needs when they're volunteering, not putting them where we need them, but rather putting them where they would be most productive and where it would mean something to them. So I think that realization is very important.
Yeah. And like he said, as you're making your action plan, make sure you account for all the stuff that needs to be done within your organization. And, put little notes there, like here's all the things we need our micro volunteers to do. Here's, how many board positions we're going to have open this year. Do we need to add more to committees? How do you need these people? And then how are you going to not just find them, but how are you going to recruit them as far as, are you going to have an onboarding meeting? Are you going to just do it all through a paper registration? So kind of think through that too, how not only how you need them, but how you're going to onboard them into the organization.
Yeah, and I think our Main Streets do a very good job of having on their websites a donate now button, but just as important should be a volunteer button. So it makes it easy for folks to see what are the volunteer opportunities, but then also how do I get in touch with you and make that connection.
So here's just some best practices. You need to create a good foundation. So like we said, define those roles and responsibilities, not just what those roles are, but what does that entail with that specific role. Provide some sort of orientation, whether that's an in-person. Lots of times we had people reach out to us and we would say, hey, let's just go grab a coffee or come up to the office and let's just chat about some of the stuff that we do. Let's chat about not only what our needs are, but what your interests are. And we found that was just a better, because I personally just find like relationship building is just key to this whole thing. And it is very time consuming, but it really is really critical that they feel heard and wanted and needed. And just having that conversation, in my opinion, really makes a huge difference. So then does it need training? Sometimes stuff doesn't need training, but if it does, how is that going to be implemented? Is that the staff that's going to do that? If you have staff, is it somebody on the board that's going to do that? use some sort of centralized volunteer management. And I know some people are going to be like, what's out there? What's out there? What's out there? Honestly, just keeping things straight in your action plans, in my opinion, is really probably the best thing. Whether you have a really big spreadsheet that kind of has all the different types of volunteers and everybody's names in emails, whatever you find that works. I think usually simpler is better than either paying for or subscribing into a big volunteer management system. I think keeping it simple, but you need to have something. And then in every action plan that you have, make sure you have a line item in there that says volunteers, and this is what we need, and this is how many we need. In that, so you have that good foundation built for those volunteers.
Yeah, and you mentioned, Jill, you guys were good at this in Warrensburg. If sponsors for events, going back to that needs and action plan, sponsors for events, usually those are financial related, but there could also be a volunteer component to that also. And I know Jackson, Missouri, Uptown Jackson does for their Oktoberfest. There is a sponsorship level, but the sponsorship level is that you're going to provide 10 volunteers. So I thought that was very creative because they need a lot of people to help make that event happen. And so that was a spot because some of their sponsors just couldn't give money, but hey, I can bring 10 people that can help. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah,
and to the centralized volunteer management system, the most common one we see is SignUp Genius or signup.com. And that's really the most helpful when you have those large multi-day events and you need a way for people to volunteer, but also it sends the reminder, or if they need to change their shift, they can go into the app and change their shift to something else that's open. So it doesn't involve as much communication back and forth with the committee that's putting on the event and managing that. So that's the most common. I'm sure there are others out there, but that's the one I hear the most about.
And I'll circle back around to that sponsorship, Keith. Doing a little bit of research, I came across a community that has a volunteer sponsor. So one of their sponsorship levels covers volunteers, and then those funds are used for training and T-shirts and supplies and different things for those volunteers. And so they kind of have a robust sponsorship level that covers everything to do with volunteers.
Yeah.
So as you're recruiting, you obviously need to look at your community. Everybody has lots of different dynamics to their community, but some of the people that you might think about is retirees. They obviously have a lot of time during the day, and they have a lot of experience with your community. They have a lot of knowledge. We have used retirees quite extensively in Warrensburg, and they really do have some great input.
Well, and Gayla, our state director for Missouri Main Street, when she was the executive director in Branson for the Main Street program, they had retirees that would come to their office every week and either do a mailing or stuff bags like you see in the picture here, goodie bags or welcome bags. But, they were a constant in the office once a week. What do you need us to do? Because there were a lot of retirees in the Branson community.
And obviously retirees, you can find those either through your senior centers or lots of organizations, Lions Club, Elks, all those people. There's still a lot of retirees involved with that. So those are great places to go and present and search for volunteers. Mm-hmm. Students, whether that's college, community college, high school, junior high, they're looking for those resume builders. They are have lots of out of the box thinking. They're great people to get involved in your community. And then, of course, your business owners. And they don't have to be just downtown business owners. A healthy downtown really helps your whole entire community. So just local business owners get their input and their help on volunteering. So some outreach tactics. Like I said, I'm a very relational person. So a lot of my outreach is in person or chatting with people, meeting with people. But you can always partner with schools, churches, civic groups. These are really straightforward. You kind of just call them up and say, hey, how can we partner with you? We want to get involved. We want your students to get involved. We want your churches to get involved. Let's sit down and chat about how we can make this happen. And that's just sharing your needs with those people and then just finding how they fit together. Volunteer fairs and open houses. We're going to talk a little bit later in the slideshow about a successful one that Joplin does for volunteer fairs. Use your storytelling and your recruitment tools. Make sure that when you're posting on your social medias or when you're talking to people or any of your pamphlets you put out, that it's really telling the story of your organization, where you guys started, where you came from, kind of what makes your organization special. And then, like we've been talking about, use those community partners and sponsors. When you go out for sponsorship, talk to them about their employees volunteering. Some employers will give employees days off for volunteering. I know that Walmart specifically, if they have employees that volunteer a certain amount of time with an organization, they actually give money towards that organization. So use those community partners and sponsors to find additional volunteers.
And you mentioned social media, and it's an easy tool for our Main Street programs to use to recruit volunteers, and certainly it is one tool. But I think the most impactful part of using social media in the volunteer aspect of it is more that storytelling portion of it, featuring board members, featuring committee members, featuring volunteers about why they volunteer, and do that throughout the year, not just whenever you have a big event coming up that you need volunteers for, but helping communicate to the community that, hey, there are folks volunteering for this organization, and here's why they do it. They love their downtown district, or they love their community, or, they have children and they want their children to be part of volunteering and be part of the community. There's lots of stories about why people volunteer. And I think, the biggest message in communicating these things is what's the why? Why should people be involved? It's the same thing for fundraising. Why should people give money to the organization? What is the why? And so as you're reaching out to these organizations, the schools, the churches, and the civic groups, what's the why? Why should they be engaged with Main Street and helping provide some volunteers for X, Y, and Z? Well, again, it kind of goes back to community pride. They all want a great place to live. They want a great place to raise a family. Maybe it's part of their, if it's Rotary Club, part of their mission is to help out in the community. And so tapping into those things and finding those correlations and finding that why.
Absolutely. So communication, this, maybe should have been all in bold. So communication is key. I've already said this lots of times, relationships, building those relationships, but really you got to keep communicating. You've got to, and I know it sounds really simple, but they've got to know what they're doing. They've got to know where they're supposed to show up, what type of clothing they might need to wear, how long they're going to be there. Communicating is so key. And not just, don't just email them. If depending on what type of project it is, you may need to text them. You may need to remind them. I mean, I know lots of times we're like, these are adults. We shouldn't have to remind them, but sometimes you do. So it's better to over communicate. I don't think anybody's ever said, please stop communicating with me. So use those emails. Social media, you can create a volunteer Facebook group. I know a lot of people do that. To communicate to their volunteers. Those face-to-face updates are always going to be my top priority. And then just keep that messaging about what you guys are doing consistent, why you're doing it, why it's important. And then, like he said, you got to share those stories. You've got to share those stories. You've got to put it out there, whether it's talking about it on your weekly radio show, or whether it's, maybe twice a year doing a write-up for the newspaper. It's putting it in your newsletters. It's giving those impact stories when you're presenting to another group, saying, hey, you guys were so helpful last year, and this is why, and this is the metrics of what you guys impacted. It's using those things when you're going to ask for sponsorship. We have X amount of volunteers. This is what our volunteers say about our organization. And then it's obviously getting them orientation. So we talked about that. Do they need a full-on orientation? Is it just a quick conversation? Is it a piece of paper you can hand them that says what they're supposed to do? So communication is really key in keeping your volunteers not just informed, but really appreciated and coming back and wanting to do it again.
Well, and Jill, you picked great photos for all of these slides. And in every slide, you can tell people are having fun. And so I think that's another aspect of communicating is that, hey, we're a fun organization and you want to be part of what we're doing. And then I also thought about your comment about metrics and things like that. In my mind, I was thinking of metrics, though. If you have a Rotary Club and a Lions Club, challenge them each to send the most volunteers. Who's gonna win in sending the most volunteers to our event, and just make it fun. People want to volunteer for fun things.
So use your digital tools. We've talked about this a little bit, make that Facebook post asking for volunteers. And then of course, thanking them on the back end, but, make a Facebook group, use your Instagram. Nextdoor is a platform that every community has that you can put your needs for volunteers on there. Use your Sign Up Genius. Eventi is one that I've worked with recently that kind of does a similar thing to Sign Up Genius. Google Forms. Just make it easy for your volunteers to sign up. Like he said, have that volunteer button on your website. When you go to any presentation, chat with them about volunteering, whether it's a QR code, if that is what works for your community, whether it's just a piece of paper. And if it may just be chatting with somebody at that women's luncheon and them saying, I'd like to know more about it, and just taking their business card, putting their phone number in your phone, sending yourself an email that says, hey, follow up with Susie Smith from Jonestown Realty. She seemed like she was really interested. They don't even have to say, when I was doing this, they didn't have to say they're interesting. That they were interested in volunteering. If they seemed interested in Main Street, I would try to follow that up with something, an email, great meeting you. We would love to have you get involved with our organization, kind of thing. And you just never know where those cold reaches are going to go.
Yeah, and that's a great point. We're talking about Main Street all the time, but are we, putting an ask or thinking about them from a volunteer perspective when we're having that conversation? You mentioned, Facebook, Instagram, Nextdoor, and the Sign Up Genius and Google Forms. But I also think putting in, many of you do newsletters. Is there a place on the newsletters talking about upcoming volunteer opportunities? I know most of our newsletters are more from a marketing perspective of our events, but many of those folks on your email list are probably residents of your own community. And so why not put those volunteer opportunities on there? And I'm just going to go back to what we kind of started with is, what do we need volunteers for? So what are the job descriptions? What are the needs currently? If we need 5 ticket takers at this event, put that down, help them understand, help them see themselves doing one of those jobs because they go, oh, I know what that means, or the description shares what that job is going to entail. And you said it too, Jill, over-communicate. And that includes, what are the expectations?
So this is the fun part, right? The appreciation. And this, I think, is something that we sometimes forget or we don't make it a priority. And this should honestly be a big priority when you're working through your volunteer plan each year, is showing that appreciation. Keith said, let it be fun. These are actually volunteers from our Main Street. And we had just a thank you for our volunteers. And it was in the summer, and we invited every single person that had volunteered with us, that we had their contact information throughout the year. And we had,
I love those t-shirts.
Yeah. And everybody that showed up got a t-shirt. It just says best volunteer ever. And it was just a way to say thank you to them. You don't have to do a big event. Maybe it's a personal thank you card. Maybe it's a shout out on social media. Maybe it's a shout out at their work. Maybe it's saying, hey, this person really showed up in a big way. Do you guys have a staff meeting? We'd love to come in and just, hype them up during your staff meeting. It's really just recognizing people, because when they feel appreciated, they're going to come back and they're going to bring other people with them. And like he said, make it fun, make people welcome them, make them feel like they're being heard. If they have ideas, take those up to the board. Don't just poo-poo ideas away because they weren't coming from your board or they weren't coming from your staff. Let their voices be heard and give them kudos. We sometimes, a group that we overlook a lot is some of your city staff. We started with our big festival. A lot of us have big giant festivals, and a lot of our city staff, especially in our community, it's our public works department. They work overtime and extra time, and they're the ones that are moving the barricades and the chairs and the tables, and they're coming in on Sunday. And yeah, they're getting monetary compensation, but we started, taking them some pizza or some donuts on that Monday morning and just saying, hey, we recognize what you're doing is important, and that maybe you're a group of people who never get recognized in our community. So maybe it's giving them a shout out on your social media or your website or your newsletter. It's recognizing everybody. Even if, like I said, those people are getting paid, they're getting compensated. But, sometimes it's just thanking them in a different way, and it's going to make them want to show up and do their best work for you year after year.
Yep. Great information. And yeah, in Main Street world, we're so ready to move on to the next project that we forget to thank our volunteers after a big project or after a big event, and need to do that right after the event. And it's also great to also then have a conversation about what worked at the event and what didn't. How are we going to make improvements for next year? But there has to be that thank you, appreciation shown. And then, yes, annually, I think an appreciation volunteer annual meeting, whatever that looks like for your community, to do some sort of recognition of their hard work. And then calling out those that maybe were the cream of the crop, and you do an annual awards and you give out a volunteer of the year. Many Main Street communities then use that as their nomination for then the state Main Street awards that we do at the state conference. And so it's a nice way to continue to recognize people, not only locally, but then also on a state level.
Yeah. And we actually, in Warrensburg for quite a while, we do volunteer of the quarter. So every quarter we recognize somebody, and that comes up through our org committee. Somebody, and it can be anybody. It can be a board member. It can be somebody that's just come in. Maybe it's that micro volunteer that showed up week after week, for 3 months straight. And then we take those 4 people, and that's who we use to nominate for our volunteer of the year. And then we are one of those communities. And then whoever wins that recognition goes on to be our nomination for the state. And just, to talk about using all your volunteers. We had a young kid in our community several years ago. He lived downtown with his family, and almost every Saturday, I shouldn't say every Saturday, a lot of Saturdays, he got on his little ride-on truck. He was like 5, and he rode around downtown and picked up trash.
I remember that.
Yes, and that was his thing, and he did it really, really consistently. And we nominated him for Volunteer of the Year. So it doesn't have to be an adult. It can be somebody small making that big impact in their community.
And he then won the state award that year also.
He did.
It was awesome story. Awesome story. Yeah. Yep. We are getting close to wrapping up. We're kind of in the last portion of the presentation, the last half an hour. I wanted to remind folks to, if you have questions, go ahead and start putting those in the question and answer section. I know somebody raised their hand. We don't have the capability to let you speak through the webinar platform, but if you would either put your question in the chat or in the Q&A portion, Jill and I will handle those and tackle those when we get to the end of the presentation, because I think we have some examples to start sharing here in just a second. Yeah, right now.
So here's just a few great ideas. I know that there's lots more out there, but I found these few chatting with people over the years that I thought were great ideas. So Liberty has a youth engagement. This is actually done in coordination with their high school. And the high school runs the bulk of this program. I was talking to Danelle a little bit about it. It's called the Downtown Liberty Main Street 53 team. It is part of their high school curriculum. They get credit for this. And they come in and they do all sorts of things for Danelle. She was just going on and on about the success of this program, and that one of the things that they do every time a group of students come in is they run their TikTok for Liberty. They're the ones in charge of it. They also, she said, they do a lot of great photography for them, a lot of great pictures, a lot of great content. She also said that she's had these interns in the past work one-on-one with business owners on just improving their social media. So these students are coming in and chatting with them one-on-one and helping them with their social media. But she said that this is a great program that they have in cooperation with their high school. This is on their Liberty's website, easy to find, or you can Google 53 Main Street 53, and you can find this, or you can reach out to Danelle, and I'm sure she can point you in the right direction. This was a great idea to bring in a youth team that kind of not just brings new energy and ideas into your group, but engages those youth, because those are your next generation. That's your next generation, not just of volunteers, but it's your next generation of civic leaders. It's your next generation of downtown business owners. These kids are the ones that are going to come in behind you in the next 10 years and open those new businesses, run for city council, or city alderman. Like, these are those people that you want to engage early, so then that they are the ones that can come in behind you.
Yeah, and Liberty's also, they have those big electrical boxes in the downtown district, and you guys may have seen a lot of communities cover those so that they're a little more attractive. So again, worked with the high school, and the art students are the ones who created the designs that go on those electrical boxes as wraps. So just a lot of collaboration between the school district and the Main Street program. And Danelle's on this webinar. So Danelle, thank you for your leadership with that, and did help with a presentation at the state conference related to youth engagement.
It looks like it's a great program. So if anybody's interested in really getting it, this is a very high level youth engagement because they do get class credit for it. So if anybody's interested in that, but any, high level gives you quality people. They're doing it for class credit. They're really going to have some want to succeed at it. So you get, like I said, you can reach out to Danelle, or you can Google that or look on their website and find information. Something else I think is super creative is a volunteer expo, downtown Joplin. They do this volunteer recruitment event. They've previously done it twice a year, but they have moved it to once a year. Lori was chatting with me about that. They set it up like a science fair. So they kind of, they meet in a space, they provide snacks. Lori gets up and gives a little short presentation about Main Street and what they do and who they are. And they have the different committees or projects set up almost like a science fair booth, where it's those cardboard foldouts with pictures or information. And they have a volunteer standing there and chatting with other people about what it entails. And they get signups that way. The way they get people to show up to the volunteer expo is obviously they put it out on their normal channels, their Facebook and their newsletters and all that. But they also ask all of their volunteers to bring one friend, at least one friend that they think might be, or it doesn't have to be a friend. Obviously, it can be a relative, it can be a neighbor, it can be just somebody that they know in the community that might be interested. They keep it short and sweet, and they provide snacks. And so you can also look on their social media and find information about that, or I'm sure you can reach out to Lori and she'd be happy to chat with you about that.
And I attended one of these one time, and it was really well done. The board president talked about the organization overall, and then each committee chair, the one I attended, they weren't doing it the science fair way. That's a really good way to help visually communicate. But each chairperson got up and shared what that committee did, what their projects were, kind of doing their sales pitch to get those new potential volunteers to join their committee. So I thought it was very cool. And of course, there's food and beverage that goes along with that to make it a fun event. And usually there are 30 to 40 people at these volunteer expos. And I'm sure most of you would appreciate 30 to 40 additional volunteers, right?
Something else that I thought was a great idea, and Old Town Cape did this. They actually, I believe, did it pre-COVID. But if you just feel like you just need a little incentive, maybe it's, and they just did it for a short time, is they did an incentive program. So they had a point system that came with volunteering, showed up to a board meeting, invited a friend to volunteer, whatever that looked like. And then they gave out swag. So, you got 10 points and you got a free downtown koozie. I've seen other organizations that they give incentives by offering gift cards to downtown businesses. So if you feel like you need a little jolt, and for me, this is more for maybe some of your board, your committee members, people that volunteer with you pretty regularly. If you need kind of an incentive, maybe it could be something fun. That, like he said, maybe you challenge your board and committees to bring on 2 new volunteers or whatever, or maybe 2 new partners or 2 new financial contributors. It's just kind of a fun way to engage people, is to kind of have a little incentive program and assign points and then things that they get. Maybe they get a free coffee. Maybe they get a lunch with the board president, Maybe they get a lunch with the executive director. So something just to think about outside of the box, just a little incentive program. I don't think it's ever meant to be run long-term, but it'd be fun just to kind of start out your year that way and then give out the prizes at the end kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. So we're to the Q&A, Jill, and so I do have some. Folks have been supplying some questions. So some of them are comments. One of them, and this is a great way to recognize volunteers, and I think they've done this with their city workers, as recognizing what the city workers do as far as the Main Street program goes, but they've accepted to be their grand marshal for the Festival of Lights this year. So that's another great way to recognize volunteers. I have someone asking about a youth board, and do you have a contract you use with them? So with our 2 Main Street programs that have the most youth engagement is Liberty, that Jill mentioned, and also then Chillicothe. So Liberty's is the 53 team. Chillicothe's is called the Maniacs, which is kind of cute. And they have their own organization, so it's kind of called a junior Main Street program or a youth Main Street program. And this is Becky from Washington asking. I would say, I don't know if they're formally a board as a youth organization. And Jill, I don't know if you know if Danelle has done it.
No, they treat them more like
Tommy.
interns from what I understood from Danelle, they treat them more like interns because it is, sorry, my dog is barking. They treat them more like interns because it's a short term, it's just a semester commitment.
Okay. So Chillicothe is with the high school, and I just don't know if they're formally organized, so that would be a question you could reach out to the Chillicothe Main Street program for. I know that they have some sort of organization to them, but I don't know if it's official with having their own board. We do have, or we keep promoting, I don't know that we have this officially, putting somebody from your local college or your local high school onto your board of directors. And you need to look at the legality of that. I have read some bylaws that state you have to be 21 and over to serve on the board of directors. And so, that might eliminate your high school folks, but it could be a special appointment, or you could change your bylaws to make that happen. But you definitely want that engagement. Someone asked, go ahead, Jill.
I would say Warrensburg, we try to keep a college student on our organization, on our board, because we do have a university in our community. That is a little bit of a tough nut to crack. Those kids are really busy, but right. we have tried to do that through the Alumni Foundation to secure that not necessarily nomination, but the people. We've used it. We've had interns in the past to see if they want to come on and join the board. That is a really high turnover position as far as a board. seat
Yep.
because they do. By the time you get them, they're almost a junior, and then
Right.
then they're off.
Right. Yeah.
I also have seen at Main Street do a high school club where you get a teacher involved and they create just a regular club, just like any other club that the high school has. But this club focuses on Main Street. So they actually are a club in the school, but then they liaison with Main Street of what they can do as far as volunteer activities.
Yeah, great ideas, great things. Someone asked, where can you get the recording? These are always archived on our YouTube page. If you just search Missouri Main Street from YouTube, you can find those. Danelle did chime in. We have students from William Jewell College serve on our board. She can send the description. Danelle, if you just send that to me, I can send it out to everyone else, I think. Let's see. Not just the recording, but the transcript. Someone asked about the transcript. I think someone came in with an AI tool for the webinar. That's not done by us, so I can't provide a transcript of the recording. Sorry, that's not something that we currently are doing. We just post all of our videos onto YouTube. Someone asked how to engage the university with retailers. Like delivering lunches for staff meetings from restaurants or help with volunteering as a temp worker for college credit during holidays. Who do you speak to at the university level? Jill, you've worked with universities before. When you're trying to make those connections, where do you start?
So what we did when I very first came on and wanted to try to make those connections, I went and found the professor that most closely aligned with what we did. So our university actually has an events management program. So I went to the head of that department. It wasn't just the program, it was the head of that whole department, and sat down with him and had a really long conversation on how we can get students, not just students, but more faculty involved. And through that conversation, we started working with their advertisement class, their events management class. It really kind of just started the ball rolling with our relationship with the university, because the more students and teachers and faculty you work with, then that kind of gets around, and then they can kind of start reaching out to you, and then you're just up at the university more, and more doors and opportunities open. But I would just start, if you're wanting student involvement, I would start there with whatever area that you think most closely aligns with what you're trying to accomplish. So if it's business, then maybe go to that business department and just ask that the head of that department. And if the head doesn't have time, maybe find that professor and just chat with them about how you guys can work together to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, and some other things that I've heard in working with other communities with colleges is I was just in Maryville yesterday, and they go through the Greek life for like cleanup days and things like that, because the fraternities and sororities have to do so much community service per year. So go through like the Greek Life Council. Cape Girardeau with Southeast Missouri State University goes through the Historic Preservation Department, because that aligns with our work as Main Street, being economic development and historic preservation, but also have a great relationship from the entrepreneur side of things, because Southeast has an entrepreneurship program. So yeah, it's, taking a look at the university and what it offers, what's its coursework, trying to find that alignment, as Jill said. How is it going to benefit both parties? Because it has to benefit both parties. It has to benefit the university and the students, and, it just kind of depends upon how they look at it. And then, of course, helping the Main Street program. So I think we have gotten all of through the Q&A. So Jill, I appreciate your time and effort in putting this together and your expertise. Really appreciate that. And appreciate all of you for being part of this. Happy Thanksgiving. And as always, this will be posted in the next few days to our YouTube channel. You'll get a follow-up email with the link to that YouTube channel also, so you don't have to go search for it. And wish you all a happy what is today? Tuesday. Happy Tuesday. All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.